All right. Hi, everyone. I just want to say welcome to this wonderful DPVA event of political updates and happenings. I am Delegate Jennifer Carroll Foy, and I will be tonight's moderator. I represent the 2nd District in the Virginia House of Delegates, representing Prince William and Stafford, and I am also a candidate running for governor here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so thank you for joining this discussion with House Majority Leader Charnel Herring, Senator Gonzalo Hashmi, and Delegate Elizabeth Guzman. Before we kick it off, I wanted to introduce our amazing panelists. House Majority Leader Charnel Herring is our fearless leader in the House of Delegates who led us through one of the most successful sessions in modern Virginia history. Under her leadership, we passed sweeping reforms to make our Commonwealth work better for women, LGBTQ, individuals, and working families. Thank you and welcome, Majority Leader Charnel Herring.
Thank you so much.
We also have Senator Gonzalo Hashmi. She is the first Muslim American woman elected to the state Senate, and she has been working diligently and championing for her constituents, passing legislation to help English language learners and teachers. Welcome, Senator Hashmi.
Thank you.
And we also have Delegate Elizabeth Guzman. She is the first Latina ever elected to the General Assembly. In her time in the legislature, she has worked to give workers a voice and stand up for those who are voiceless. And her advocacy on, for example, collective bargaining has been pivotal to this General Assembly and especially last session, working hard for working families. So just want to say welcome, Delegate Guzman.
Thank you.
Today's discussion is going to be focused on the upcoming special session and the thought process that goes into planning for a legislative session to not only address the past 6 months of COVID-19 and the organic protests that spurred from the killing of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and the countless other Black and brown men and women who have died on our corners due to racial injustice, but also how the legislative body can work to ensure that voters in Virginia aren't forced to choose between participating in our democracy and their own health. So we will ask the panelists some questions and take audience questions as well. But first, I want to give everyone on this panel a chance to offer some opening remarks. So Majority Leader Charnel Herring, we will start with you.
Thank you so much, Delegate Carroll Foy, and I thank everyone for joining us. And I also love this opportunity to say thank you for all the support that you have given our candidates over the years. I will say, with the ushering in of Delegate Carroll Foy and Elizabeth Guzman's class, we started to see a change in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I think that's made a significant difference. We made a concerted effort in our caucus to make sure that we're recruiting and supporting women candidates who are running. We have a record number of women, and we have huge diversity. I think with that, we have seen a significant change in the policies that we are passing, from criminal justice reform to making sure that we are protecting and doing right by our workers, to environmental justice, and the list goes on and on. So everything that we do in that legislature matters in people's personal lives. I want everyone to know also everything that you did to help elect our delegates and our senators, especially in this past election cycle, that made a huge difference for the future of Virginia. So I'm glad to have this, again, to have this opportunity to say thank you.
Thank you. And now Senator Gonzalo Hashmi.
Thank you so much, Delegate Carroll Foy, and good evening to everyone who's participating. So glad to have you here. I'm honored to be on this panel. These are exceptional women leaders, and I have often looked to them for their leadership and their guidance all throughout this past session. I was elected in November 2019 as a first-time candidate to the Virginia Senate, and I represent the 10th Senate District, which covers a good part of Richmond City as well as parts of Chesterfield County and all of Powhatan County. And one thing that I've learned through this session is that we have every opportunity to make significant changes in Virginia. And it comes because of the hard work of so many people. It took well over a decade to bring forth so many of the critical changes that we were able to pass in this year's Legislative Assembly. And that's because of the advocates, the organizations, the work of people on the ground, the volunteers, and certainly the DPVA. It took all of us to make sure that we create a Virginia that's equitable, that responds to the needs of working families, and that really seeks to be inclusive and welcoming for all folks that live in our Commonwealth. So I'm really excited for the discussion tonight. I'm excited because we have opportunity to continue the change, even though we're facing tremendously challenging times. This is the best opportunity that we have to be able to make the kind of changes that are going to be meaningful and that will impact all of our Virginia families for the better. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And now, Delegate Elizabeth Guzman.
Thank you, Delegate Carol Foy. I would like to start first thanking DPVA for the invitation and for thinking of me to be on this great panel conversation among these great women of power, including the moderator as well. That we could say, a lot of things that she has accomplished in the Virginia Assembly as well, starting for criminal justice reform and rights for the working class. And I will be remiss if I don't acknowledge, the amount of contributions that she has made to the Virginia Assembly. And I would then start by, saying thank you to all of those people who believe in us. And we run on an agenda where we want to put Virginia in a different place. We were, proud to be in the #1 of business, like our leader just said, but we needed to do so much to accomplish that, to address the needs of the working class. So we had great amount of reforms and would not be able to accomplish any of those with the support of our very own majority leader, Chanel Herring, and a progressive voice in the Senate, like Senator Hashmi. It's just in those times of difficulty where we have to have these difficult conversations. It was nice to have, to be talking to people that they have they are minded, like you, about addressing the needs of the working class. And we would not be able to be doing what we were doing and accomplishing the things that we accomplished without the support of the many people who believe in us. Thank you for the postcards that you wrote. Thank you for the donations that you made. Thank you for the doors that you knocked as well. The least that we could do is delivering on the promises that we made to you on the campaign trail. And this was just the first year. We're getting ready for a special session and the next session. And we are extremely excited, working hard as well to unseat Donald Trump. I think this is the election of our times this November. And I would take this opportunity to invite everyone to speak with their friends, their co-workers, their classmates, their neighbors, that this is the election of our times, this one in November 3rd. And we could all work together to elect Vice President Biden as the next president of the United States.
Awesome. So thank you so much. It's so overwhelming to be on a panel with so many passionate, powerful, prestigious women, and specifically women of color. So let's get right to it. First question to Delegate Guzman. I guess we'll go in the opposite direction. What are your priorities for the upcoming special session? What criminal justice reform measures are you looking forward to working on in August?
So I would start by saying that I think in our caucus, we work really well together. So we are still, I don't want to say things that have not been still, I would say vetted and run through leadership. But I think that there are certain legislation that will not be new to Virginians. For example, providing basic days to Virginians. And we're using this opportunity not only to do that, but providing also paid sick time when individuals have to quarantine. So we are going to push that. I'm going to push that legislation. We are limited on the amount of legislation that we could introduce. and it has to be limited to COVID-19, to criminal justice reform or police reform. So I am hopeful, that I could get the votes that we need in the Senate. I want to also take this opportunity to thank leadership and my House colleagues for providing the support that we needed to pass this meaningful legislation that I've been fighting for the last 3 years. And, working with Senator Favola in the Senate, and I'm hoping that we could get the votes that we need this special session. There's another bill that I would like to bring up, which talks about the membership of the Committee on Training in the Department of Criminal Justice Services. The last time that we looked, and they are the ones who present and approve the standards for training for police officers. The last time that we looked at that membership was at least 13 years ago. And when I was looking at the membership, we didn't have anyone who could actually represent people who are experts on inclusiveness and diversity, like the diversity and inclusion and equity officer. So I would love for her to have a seat at the table when we're having these conversations. I would like also to bring citizens representing community interests of minority individuals, because we don't have any representation as well. And I think that we talk a lot about mental health and what are we doing to address the needs of the mental health individuals. But I have to be fair and addressing also that there is exposure to certain traumas as well to police officers, and I think that they deserve, for those to be addressed as well. So with that being said, I would like also to include one mental health psychologist provider on this board. So when they are preparing training for the next year, we could have all of these voices that were not represented before. There's also, during this pandemic, there's a community that have not been helped throughout this process. They have not, my undocumented brothers and sisters have not been able to get any type of aid or support just because they don't have legal presence in this country. So I'm hopeful that when I talk to my House colleagues and the members in the Senate, we could provide an uplifting ban on Virginia assistance to undocumented communities under the pandemic. And finally, I would like to thank Delegate Torian. This will not be my bill or budget amendment, that's his, but since he's not here, he's gonna bring a budget amendment about continue to provide hazard pay for those essential workers. Providing Delegate Tran will provide a bill from protection from retaliation. And I'll, depending on what we can the amount of legislation that we could all bring, I would love also to provide workers' compensation when you are an essential employee and you are exposed to COVID, and then you have, secondary effects. And on criminal justice, I think that we definitely need police accountability and transparency. So I would like to commend the members of the Black Legislative Caucus for all of the bills that they are currently working and planning to support each one of them, because we need to we have to empower civilian review boards. And I said civilian and not citizens because we want to make sure that those communities that are not represented before needs to be represented, and they need to be part of the process to investigations, discipline, and fire officers. And we need outside accountability so the public could continue to earn trust, on law enforcement. We also need to make sure that officers who have been fired for excessive force or resigned during excessive force investigation cannot get hired in other localities. So right now, last week we had a meeting where Senator Marsden put together, and I know Senator Hashmi and Leader Chanel Herring were in there as well, and we're looking at as far as changing the decertification process for police officers as well. And, and I think we also need to ban chokeholds, like the kind that killed George Floyd as well, for example, or we need to prohibit the no-knock warrants that killed Breonna Taylor as well. So I could continue, but I know it's gonna be a short session and there's so many things that we could accomplish, and we're hopeful that we could get as much as we can, but we don't know yet.
Thank you, Delegate Guzman. And Senator Hashmi, what are your priorities for the upcoming special session and criminal justice reform measures you're most looking forward to this coming August?
So I was listening very intently to Delegate Guzman. I think all of our priorities are in good alignment with each other, and I think we'll see many of the same bills emerging from both the Senate as well as the House, and we will be able to make some meaningful reform, both for criminal justice and for policing in our communities. One of my top priorities for special session, of course, is budget issues. For all of us, it's a central concern. At this moment, we have to be able to restore funding in many critical areas. So many areas of our biennium budget were unallotted because of the COVID crisis. We had to see the budgetary impacts on our state and on particular priorities that we have. And I think by next week, we'll have a better understanding of where the state's budget is and what we can expect from federal dollars to help us through this crisis as well. So one of my top priorities as we come back into special session is to reallot those very, very vital areas for the state. And top of my list is education, making sure that our schools and our institutions of higher education receive the funding that they need to safely continue the learning progress for our students, to reopen our institutions at a safe point when we're able to as a state, and then also to make sure that the faculties, teachers, staff are adequately supported in the areas that they need. Also along with that is my concern for the students, the children who have gone through fairly significant trauma through this COVID crisis, through all the uncertainties, many of them facing housing insecurity, food insecurity. We have a great responsibility to make sure that the children in the most vulnerable communities are going to be supported so that they can flourish and that they can actually have access to the education and the resources that they need. Along with that, then, of course, are the looming crisis of homelessness that we have. And I think all of us are concerned with the fact that we do face eviction and housing insecurity in significant ways in this Commonwealth, and that we have to address it. And if we don't address it during special session, we are going to see fairly perilous times this fall for so many Virginia families. In terms of the criminal justice and police reform measures that I'm focused on, I am working on a bill with many of our local advocates here in the Central Virginia region on the Civilian Review Board that Delegate Guzman also outlined. And with this particular measure in the CRBs, we want to make sure that they have the kind of strength and that they have the kind of ability to take meaningful action. So the CRB bill that we're going to be introduced will grant increased local authority and authority to the Civilian Review Board to hold subpoena power, to take meaningful disciplinary action if it's needed, and also to be independent of the police divisions, the police departments. Those are critical and necessary steps. We have the research from other states that indicate that this is the kind of civilian review boards that we actually need. In addition to CRBs, I'm working with Senator McClellan to introduce legislation for the Marcus Alert Act. This in particular is so relevant for folks here in Central Virginia in the Richmond area, as it is across the state, of course. Marcus Alert Act is named for Marcus David Peters, a beloved teacher in Richmond who was tragically killed while he was experiencing a mental health crisis. And we know that individuals who face mental health crises need to have a mental health professional responding to them. And so the Marcus Alert Act will help to ensure that these individuals are responded to appropriately, that they get the care and the attention that they need, and that they are secured safely for their own safety as well as for those people that are around them. So those are a couple of the bills that I'm going to be focusing on specifically.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And now, Majority Leader and Chairwoman of Courts of Justice, we are all waiting with bated breath to hear what your priorities are for this upcoming special session and the criminal justice reform measures you're most looking forward to for this upcoming August.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And first, I think the top priority Senator Hashmi pointed to was the budget. So it is about the numbers in terms of what we can, pay for. Hopefully, we can hopefully do more than we expected when we left Richmond, and we thought that, the impact, we certainly have had a financial impact. It's not as big as we expected, but when we, we'll have a GECR meeting and we'll figure out where exactly we are and sort of what approach to take and the money committee should take with the budget. That being said, now the fun part. And because I've been in the General Assembly, I guess it's about now 11 years, and I felt sometimes like a lone wolf. And it was so good to see so many progressives come in here and do the assembly and fight for reform. But when we saw, and I think what happened with George Floyd is the nation saw and it visualized finally what people of color have been saying and experiencing all of our lives. And that has created a sense of urgency. Now, I know, especially from the hearing that we had today, we had a joint committee hearing of the House Courts of Justice and the Public Safety. And there are still some that believe that we should not do anything. But even when you have law enforcement saying, I need the tools to decertify, to take away the privilege of being a law enforcement officer, when I have somebody who is doing bad, who is violating our rules, this is our time to make sure and restore the trust that the police should have, but has been violated. That trust has been violated for many years, and I think people are finally seeing what we are talking about. And that's not to say that there are bad police officers, but what happens is that the bad ones have created this sort of situation where every one of us, I know my heart still pounds strongly when I'm pulled over by a police officer, because I do not know what I'm going to be met with when he walks toward my door. That should not be. And I had an interesting conversation with a businessman who said, when I'm pulled over, the thing that comes to my mind is, I probably have a tail light out. I'll be warned and just told to go fix it. And that his experience is so different from my experience. This is our time. So with that, this is our time to, hopefully we can invest in officer training. And I am talking about bias training. And this is something that can't just happen once, but it has to be continuous. Training on de-escalation. And I will say that we have been putting in bills on these issues, at least people in my caucus, for many, many, many years. It is imperative, I think, that DCJS show leadership, and they are the ones that are responsible for the training and I think they do intend to have a uniform proposal across the state. But we must do it. It cannot wait until 2022. It needs to happen sooner rather than later. And I encourage everyone who's listening to push the envelope on that. We cannot allow politics of police departments to interfere with that. Police officers are supposed to be the protectors of our constitutional rights. That is something that's so fundamental, and it is unfortunate that we have to witness violations. I agree with my colleagues here that the Civilian Review Board is very important. I think that's an important mechanism, again, to restore trust. And I think that's important to recognize that we need healing, and that is a good mechanism to start the healing process, where civilians feel engaged, they feel, and they're able to evaluate. And then police officers know that there are civilians out there relying on them to follow procedure and protocol that's appropriate. Now, on criminal justice reform, that's police reform, criminal justice reform, I have to talk about expungement and Delegate Don Scott's earned time credit. And during session, I noticed a trend, and I even fell into that trend of trying to carve out an expungement for this crime or that crime. And what happens is when we do that, we have inequities in our criminal justice system. So I put all the expungement bills into a study for this reason. I want us to ask ourselves, what can we do on automatic expungement? Other states are doing it. There's no reason that Virginia can't do it. So we're going to look at that. That way we start to eliminate inequities in our criminal justice system. And the second thing is Don Scott's earned time credit bill. That bill, I think, restores hope for individuals who are serving time to do what they need to do in education and job training, and to, once they're released, to have a new, outlook on life. All that requires funding. I will say that I have had conversations with partners in the business community who are actually starting to see what we have been talking about for years, that this is an opportunity to give people a shot and a fair shot once they are released. So those are my top ones that I'm looking forward to working on.
Awesome, thank you. And very briefly, my priorities for the upcoming session is seeing things happen such as Legal Aid Justice Center be given more money so they can help and assist with all the COVID-19 related evictions that we have coming up here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Also fully funding or restoring funding back to a lot of the workforce development programs that we had initially allocated money for in the budget, which is something I'm really excited about, and restoring as much of the teacher pay increase that we can supply. And as far as criminal justice reform, as the first and only public defender ever elected to the General Assembly, I can tell you that's something I'm really excited about. Everything that everyone on this panel has already mentioned. Also, jury sentencing reform, which many of the organizations and advocates say is one of the most robust things that we can do to change how trials are done here for defendants in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And then also the PC for the smell of marijuana. You have to have independent probable cause in order to stop and search someone absent besides the smell of marijuana. That is something else that is also really exciting that's coming up. And like the majority leader said, expungements, all of these things. So we have a lot of things on the cusp, and I'm really excited to see what we get done. And so for the next question, this is for you, Majority Leader Charnel Herring. The Trump administration and Virginia Republicans have been pushing for complete reopening of schools in the fall, and Trump's Secretary of Education have even threatened to cut off funding for school districts that didn't reopen. What is your position on opening up schools for this fall? Have you had any feedback from teachers and administrators? And if you do believe that students should go back to school this fall, what are some things you think can be done to keep them safe?
And thanks for that question. And let me start by a phone call that I got from a teacher who is a special education teacher. She not only was worried about her health, but what she could bring to the children if she is forced to come back to the classroom. And exposing them, and she was exposed to somebody who was asymptomatic. So, and I'm going to be brief because it's sort of ridiculous to threaten school systems. I thought that was the party that said that the government that governs best is closest to the people, and that it should be a local school board decision, but I guess that's gone by the wayside. So I do think that the local school boards are in the best position to determine what is appropriate for their community, where they are in this COVID crisis. There are some areas that have larger numbers of infection than other areas. And so he's totally off base, but what's new? It's Donald Trump. So I'll leave it there.
It's a good place to leave it. All right, so Senator Hashmi, what are your thoughts about schools reopening this fall?
Well, first of all, I think we anticipated that we would be in a much better place in August last spring. We thought that 4 months, 5 months into this crisis, we would see a containment of the virus, that we would see significant progress nationally, and that we would be able to reopen parts of our economy and our schools in the way that so many other countries have been able to do. We have to lay this at the feet of the national leadership. We have to lay this at the feet of the Trump administration. They have failed this country in significant ways. And the number of deaths that we have seen nationally, the escalation of the crisis, and the complete lack of attention. This is a virus that called for significant organization, deployment of resources, and infrastructure that could be delivered nationally. So for the Trump administration to be making decisions for our local school divisions is not appropriate. We have to make sure that our children are safe. And we all agree, schools have to reopen. Children need to be in school. That's not a matter of debate. But what we need to also take into consideration that so many of our school divisions have considered is that we have to reopen safely. That is the health and the safety of the children, of the teachers, of the custodians, the school bus drivers, all the administrators. They have to feel safe. They have to be safe in order for schools to return. And so we are doing everything we can to make sure that we're able to, first of all, have an impact on the virus. And as we've seen in Virginia and in other states that have followed necessary healthcare protocols, the simple act of wearing masks, of following proper hygiene, and of practicing safety measures by staying in home as much as possible, those efforts bring our numbers down. And if we're able to keep doing that, we will be able to contain the virus in Virginia. But this is a national issue. It's also a global issue. This virus is not going to be contained just by one state alone. And so we have to have a concerted effort. I've heard from so many teachers that they don't feel safe and that they need to have assurances that going to work is not going to be a death sentence. We don't want to ask any Virginian to go to work and feel that they are facing this kind of a perilous crisis to themselves, to their families, and certainly to the children that they are teaching. One thing that I'm happy about, and I think we'll see this soon, is that the Department of Education is going to be releasing a dashboard that will help our localities make appropriate decisions for themselves about schools and about reopening. The dashboard will provide some necessary metrics that the localities can use as they make these decisions. It's certainly been a very, very complex time for our school boards, for our superintendents, for everybody involved in this process. And I know that the parents are critically engaged. We just need everybody to be working together so that we can send children back to school and send them back safely.
Awesome, thank you. And Delegate Guzman, what's your perspective? Do you think that teachers and children should be forced to go back to school, or leave it up to local school boards or school districts? And if they have to go back, what should be done?
So I think that the Virginia Department of Education, under the leadership of Secretary Carney, made the right call of empowering school districts to make their own decisions. Now, what we didn't plan was that it needed to be a decision where everyone's voices would be included, right? So we had some localities where they just make the decision in their own. We had some localities that did not include the teachers' voices and the parents' voices as well, as we were working towards reopening. So I represent 2 counties, and one has been impacted, I would say, tremendously compared to the other one. Like, I represent Prince William County and I represent Fauquier County as well. So in Fauquier County, we have not seen as many cases as we have seen in the Northern Virginia area. Plus, they are not dealing with issues like we are dealing in Prince William County with overcrowded schools. So they definitely have plenty of space, and then they made a decision to go 50%, in 2 days a week in class and 3 days a week remotely. That decision was supported by their teachers. That decision was supported by the parents, because that's the situation that they were living at that moment. In Prince William County, a decision was made without involving, the stakeholders that were important at that point of time. As a parent who is raising their children in the public schools, I would tell you that everything that I got was only a survey, but it will give me 3 limited options where I have to pick from. So I didn't think that was fair either, because it didn't represent all of the implications of what reopening means. So I think that most of localities here in the Northern Virginia have made a decision to at least go the first quarter 100% distance learning. Now, I participated in one of those rallies with the teachers in Prince William County, and I told them that, every now we are always put so much pressure on the teachers, and it is okay for them, to be worried about their health. It is okay for them to voice that they're worried about their safety. And, and many of them are the breadwinners from their home. Many of them are caregivers from their parents or their children if they have special needs. So it is okay for them to voice their concerns as well. And I think as elected officials, we need to be there to empower those voices so they could be listened. And I think the school will have more time to provide enough PPE equipment and accommodations as we move forward. Like Senator Hashmi said, we're hoping, at one point, this will be behind us. But at the same time, when we're looking at the trends, we maybe having a second outbreak sooner rather than later. So we have to be prepared for the worst. But I think it was a great move that the Virginia Department of Education empowered schools. Now, unfortunately, right now distance learning is the only safe avenue in this global pandemic. And at this time, due to the fact that we have a president that say one thing one day and the next thing next day, so we at this situation have been mishandled from the beginning. So, but there's always, a community that is left behind, and I would like this opportunity also to give a shout out to the Fairfax County Federation of Teachers, because as we are thinking about virtual, we're not thinking about those support staff, that if they will be able to keep their job, those janitors, those clerical staff, those assistant aides that are in the classroom, that they won't have a job because they go just per contracts throughout the year, and what is going to happen with them. So it is my hope that they are being able, they will be provided other responsibilities like many other local governments have made any business as far as providing teleworking options, that they could have other responsibilities, because they also need to pay their bills. They also need to provide means for their family. So I hope that as we move forward, many localities think about those individuals as well.
All right, so thank you for that. And this one is for you again, Delegate Guzman. On July 1st, we had all of our new bills from this past legislative session go into effect unless it had like a delayed enactment. Can you name one bill you worked on that you're particularly proud of? I say collective bargaining. And what are some issues that got left on the table, or a bill that you had that got left on the table that you want to make a priority in 2021?
Okay, so I would say the number one accomplishment is, and now with the support from everyone that is here with us today, is the collective bargaining bill. By providing Virginia becoming the 49th state in the country to provide collective bargaining rights to public sector employees was a huge win. And, and I will be remiss if I don't acknowledge all of the different stakeholders that work with me to make this possible. And thanking leadership in the House also for making this a priority for the House to deliver this for public employees. I think that Virginia is moving in a right direction, even though It is a different version of the version that the House presented to the Senate. We couldn't just neglect the opportunity to provide at least, an opt-in version to localities. So they will have to vote, the County Board of Supervisors, Town Council, or City Council will have to vote before they decide to allow their employees to have an election and choose that union that will represent them. But there is, like any bills, I had to acknowledge and remind myself that we were under a Republican leadership for 26 years. And sometimes change is gonna take time. So I'm extremely happy, about this victory. But if our job ends there, no, it doesn't end there. We're all coming back next year, and we are committed to work again to provide to help these individuals who we left behind. And at this time, when we're talking about 2021, the companion bill was carried by the majority leader in the Senate, Dick Zaslow. So we were, as part of this negotiation, we also agreed that by this upcoming year, we will conduct a study so we can provide this opportunity to bargain collectively to state employees as well. So we're gonna do a study this upcoming year, and then by 2022, we'll have a new governor. And hopefully that is something that will be supported by the new administration and by, an administration that really cares about the working class. And we could not have, we can provide this privilege to state employees as well.
All right, thank you for that. I would have to join in that sentiment. I think collective bargaining, even though it wasn't exactly the collective bargaining bill that we hoped for, I still think that's one of the best things that teachers can have to negotiate salaries, job protections, and everything else. And then increase the minimum wage. So even though we were able to pass it through the bodies, it's been delayed, but I think those are the two things that will be most impactful once they're implemented. And so Senator Hashmi, speaking of the budget, what's one of the most impactful budget amendments that you think, or policy that we could pass that will help us get back on track here in Virginia, especially for those Virginia workers who are struggling to make ends meet that need help the most?
I think if we're looking at our budget, we have to make sure that we address the looming eviction crisis, that we are able to forestall that by having rent relief, by providing housing vouchers, by being able to provide relief on utility bills and maintain people in their homes. We have a pandemic going around, and the one thing we're telling people in order to be safe from the pandemic is to stay at home. Well, if you don't have a home to live in, then you can't really ask people to do that. And we have very, very vulnerable communities in Virginia that are a part of this crisis. And so the budget has to address the need of keeping people at home. Other budgetary amendments that we have seen the critical need for, and we fought hard for this during this past session and weren't successful, is to incorporate paid leave and paid medical and sick leave for our working families, and also to make sure that they have a living wage. We were able to pass minimum wage in an incremental fashion. I think we can do better. I think we have to do better. This pandemic has exposed the ways in which the most essential workers in our communities are the most vulnerable. They're the ones who have been hit the hardest. They are the ones who have disproportionately died as a result of this pandemic. And it has just exacerbated all of the crisis points that we have in our communities. If we're going to take a hard look at our budget, if we're going to have a budget that reflects our values, we have to address the most vulnerable first.
Absolutely. I think that is absolutely perfect. Our job is to help the most vulnerable Virginians in the most marginalized communities and keeping people from being homeless. And, we now call all of these people on the front lines as essential, which is great. But when they look at their paychecks, it says that they're expendable, and we really need to treat our heroes as such. And that's a great way to do that. So thank you so much for that very great answer. And now we have Majority Leader Herring. And so a few weeks ago, we saw Virginia join the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And thank you for your wonderful leadership and your fight on the floor for that. And the Atlantic Coast Pipeline Project got defeated. What's next? What's next for clean energy and environmental protection here in Virginia? And what are Democrats looking to do next to tackle climate change?
Okay, so thanks for that great question, and that was exciting to see Reggie and the Clean Energy Act passed. I think what's next is to see what happens with those pieces of legislation, and then the implementation and the impact that it has on our environment. And I have to point to the Environmental Justice Council, which is another bill that I carried to finally codify that council. They will be a critical and important element when we determine what is next. They have been meeting. I know that, I attended one of the meetings briefly for a bill signing, but they are continuing to work. And for those who are not familiar with the Environmental Justice Council, this is a diverse group of people from all parts of the Commonwealth to look at our policies in the Commonwealth of Virginia, look at projects and determine if there is environmental injustice happening. And I think that's key into fashioning our policy. I think we're going to see hopefully some positive things. I'm sure we will, especially with the Reggie bill when we talk about a fund created to address the coastal flooding that is happening. And with that, I think we just have to monitor, but also be vigilant and look at what policies next. And that was a great question. I think, though, that we will probably see what will happen in the next few months and with those two pieces of legislation and its impact on Virginia.
Fantastic. I mean, in Virginia, we just led the way in so many ways. I was excited to see so much support, and I was chief co-patron also of the Virginia Clean Economy Act, and everyone supported that here. That pushed Virginia to be the first Southern state to be on a track of 100% zero carbon emissions by 2050. And there's even more that we can do. And I look forward personally to bringing the bill to put a moratorium on fossil fuels so we can end our addiction to dirty fossil fuels here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so just want to thank everyone here for their advocacy for creating a clean environment, clean air, clean water, and combating climate change. So now we're about to come to the close of our program, and I want to give each panelist 1 minute for your closing remarks. And we can definitely start with you, Majority Leader Charnel Herring.
Well, thank you so much. You did a wonderful job of moderating us, so thank you, and thank you for your work and leadership. And Delegate Guzman, thank you as well for your leadership and your work. You all are definitely go-getters, and it's so exciting to see you all in the chamber. And Senator Hashmi, welcome. And as Delegate Carol Foy said when we were waiting, it's like, this is a different intro that usually is not like this very busy session, and usually you have a little break. But now I said that, I wanted to just say to everybody that I think what has happened in these past few months, from the COVID crisis to Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and the list goes on and on, we have seen and sort of highlighted the inequities that exist in not only this country, but also in Virginia. We have an opportunity, and I feel like we're at a crossroads. We can either go in one direction where we do nothing, say everything's really fine, we'll get through this, don't worry, or we can go in another direction, which says we are finally going to address the inequities that exist in the Commonwealth that have been highlighted. This is our time, and as John Lewis said, let's all get troubled. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your wonderful leadership and getting us to this place where we're the most bold progressive states in the entire country as far as all the inroads and successes we've had. And I look forward to all the wonderful things you continue to do in the General Assembly and moving us in Virginia forward. And now, Senator Hashmi, your closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Delegate Carol Foy. You've been an outstanding moderator, so this has been an enjoyable conversation. Thank you, and thank you to my fellow panelists. I watched your hard work throughout session, and it is really exciting to see, especially women and women of color being able to make significant progress in transforming lives of Virginians, and that's significant. I know we've been through a very, very difficult few months here, and I know many of our families have been extremely challenged. I've been talking to constituents and reaching out to families and hearing stories, and the challenges are overwhelming for so many of us. In the midst of these challenging times, however, I've seen so many instances of hope, of resilience, of people volunteering and giving everything that they can to assist our communities through this. Many weekends, I've been out with volunteer groups that have been packaging and delivering food to houses and to families that are in need of those deliveries. And it's just encouraging to see the ways in which communities can come together. This country has every potential to lead the world in the ways that are important. And for us, we know that there is a clear moral path, and there's a clear moral sense that we have to lead in terms of setting the agenda for what is important. And those are issues focused around justice, around equity, and making sure that we support those who are most vulnerable among us. That's part of our social contract. And I think everyone on this panel takes that very seriously. And so I'm hopeful for what we will be able to accomplish in the next General Assembly and also continuing onward. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Senator Hashmi. I have to say you came in during one of the most turbulent times in the General Assembly, and your poise and your professionalism and your ability to navigate the most complicated bills and come to a decisive decision, I say it's well recognized, respected, and much appreciated. So I look forward to seeing all the wonderful things that you continue to do as our senator. And now, Delegate Guzman, 1 minute for your closing remarks of everything you like people to know in 60 seconds.
Okay, so now I just want to thank for the invitation and also thank each one of you for your leadership. It's been an honor and a privilege to share this panel with you to address the things that we are facing right now. You know, I would like to mention that under the current circumstances, there are communities that have been neglected and voiceless for so long. So I would start by saying that Black Lives Matter. And as the leader has mentioned before, the democratic agenda has not necessarily changed, but the sense of urgency has. We know the mantle of responsibility for this time is placed in our hands, and we must take these reforms swiftly, but with great care. And also, these have not been topics that are new to us, you know, and there's an article like today on the Virginia pilot about how the Black Caucus and Senator Locke in particular have been fighting for reforms that are now more urgent, including expanding what police officers can be decertified for to include serious misconduct. So these topics, you know, as I many times said in my interviews, have not been new to us. And the reason is because we have lived them, you know, and nobody could tell us what they're about. You know, I'd be remiss if I don't acknowledge, you know, the amount of people that have been affected as well through this pandemic, people who look like me. And it is my hope that in the future, you know, we invest more money in doing outreach, you know, to the Latino community, in just trying to learn how the Latino community learns better by holding town halls in Spanish and having more than 7,000 views, 10,000 views anytime I do it, doesn't mean that people are reluctant to receive that information. So it is my hope that in the near future, you know, we not only embrace the diversity that our Commonwealth has nowadays, but also work together to address the needs of every single Virginian, including the Latino community, so we cannot continue to lose lives. And it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. And Delegate Guzman, I have to say, there's few things I enjoy more than watching you work. and advocate for policies and positions that's important to you, whether it's putting the first Latino on the bench in Prince William County or fighting for teachers and police officers and firefighters for the collective bargaining bill. You are a principal leader, and your voice is definitely needed and appreciated in Richmond. And so very quickly for my closing remarks, it is an honor and privilege to be with all of these dynamic, fabulous women of color who are making moves in Richmond for the benefit of every Virginian, protecting everyone, ensuring that we shake up the status quo to move Virginia forward. And that's what this is about. So continue to support in any way that you can these phenomenal panelists and every person who's out there fighting for your community, whether that is donating postcards, whatever it is, get it out there that wonderful things are happening in Virginia, and it's because of wonderful people like the women on this panel. So thank you so much for your time and attention, and it was a privilege to be with all of you all, and let's keep up the fight. Thank you.